culture would be dead. They claim that they will win because they love death more than life, and because life lovers are feeble and corrupt degenerates. Practically every word I have written since 2001 has been explicitly or implicitly directed at refuting and defeating those hateful, nihilistic propositions, as well as those among us who try to explain them away. The Tunisian, Egyptian, and Libyan martyrs were thinking and acting much more like Palaks than like Atta. They were not trying to take life. They desired rather that it be lived on a higher level than that of a serf, treated as an inconvenience by a moribund oligarchy. They did not make sordid and boastful claims about how their homicidal actions would earn them a place in a gross fantasy of carnal afterlife. They did not wish to inspire hoarse, yelling mobs, tossing coffins on a sea of hysteria. Jan Palaks told his closest comrades that the deep reason for his gesture was not just the occupation, but the awful apathy that was settling over Prague as that spring gave way to a frosty winter. In preferring a life-affirming death to a living death in life, the harbingers of the Arab Spring likewise hoped to galvanize their fellow subjects and make them aspire to be citizens. Tides will ebb, waves will recede, the landscape will turn brown and dusty again, but nothing can expel from the Arab mind the example and esprit of Tahrir. Once again it is demonstrated that people do not love their chains or their jailers, and that the aspiration for a civilized life, that universal eligibility to be noble, as Saul Bellow's Augie March so imperishably phrases it, is proper and common to all. The best encapsulation of the disordered, sadomasochistic relationship between rulers and ruled in a closed society with a one-man regime is provided, as so often, by George Orwell, who, in Coming Up for Air, wrote of the processions and posters with enormous faces and the crowds of 1 million people all cheering for the leader until they deafen themselves into thinking that they really worship him, and all the time underneath they hate him so much they want to puke. Invited to deliver a lecture at the American University of Beirut with the suggested title, "Who Are the Real Revolutionaries in the Middle East?" I did my best to blow on the few sparks that then seemed dimly perceptible. I cited the great Egyptian dissident and political scientist and political prisoner, Sayyidin Ibrahim, now recognized as one of the intellectual fathers of the Tahrir movement. I praised the Cedar Revolution movement in Lebanon itself, which had brought about a season of hope and succeeded in putting an end to the long Syrian occupation of the country. I took the side of the Kurdish forces in Iraq, who had helped write finis to the Caligula regime of Saddam Hussein, while also beginning the work of autonomy for the region's largest and most oppressed minority. I praised the work of Salim Fayyad, who was attempting to bring transparency to bear on the baroque corruption of the Palestinian Authority. These were the disparate but not unconnected strands out of which I hoped and part believed a new cloth could be woven. It was clear that a good number of the audience, including, I regret to say, most of the Americans, regarded me as some kind of stooge. For them, revolutionary authenticity belonged to groups like Hamas or Hezbollah, resolute opponents of the global colossus and tireless fighters against Zionism. For me, this was yet another round in a long historic dispute. Briefly stated, this ongoing polemic takes place between the anti-imperialist left and the anti-totalitarian left. In one shape or another, I've been involved, on both sides of it, all my life. And in the case of any conflict, I have increasingly resolved it on the anti-totalitarian side. This may not seem much of a claim, but some things need to be found out by experience and not merely derived from principle. Several of these rehearsals and excursions of mine were discussed in my memoir Hitch-22, and several of them are reflected here too, again in reportage as well as argument. I affirm that the forces who regard pluralism as a virtue, moderate though that may make them sound, are far more profoundly revolutionary, and quite likely over the longer term to make better anti-imperialists as well. Evolving or honing any of these viewpoints has necessitated constant argument about the idea of America. There is currently much easy talk about the decline